Well, the boss of Australia's intelligence agency has revealed a nest of foreign spies have been kicked out of Australia. Mike Burgess, ASIO Director General, says the spies managed to recruit a government official and tried to obtain classified information about the country's trade network.
These spies developed targeted relationships with current and former politicians, a foreign embassy and a state police service. They monitored their country's diaspora community. They tried to obtain classified information about Australia's trade secrets. They asked a public servant about information on security protocols at a major Australian airport. They successfully cultivated and recruited a relationship with an Australian government security clearance holder who had access to sensitive details of defence technology.
The Director General says the pandemic has led to more people being radicalised. The agency also confirmed it will no longer use terms such as Islamic extremism because the label is no longer fit for purpose. Joining me live now is Peter Jennings, Executive Director of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Thanks for your time. Nest of spies. It was a bit of a shocking revelation, I guess partly because, thinking of a government official being recruited by foreign players did seem shocking, or am I being naive?
Well, it certainly goes on, and there are a number of countries that are actively working in Australia trying to do that very thing. They're looking for secret information, and they're looking for ways they can find that, be it through compromising officials or perhaps working through defence industry or a variety of different routes. And it seems on the basis of what Mike Burgess has been saying since he's been Director of ASIO that we're probably at a high point of this type of espionage since at any time since really the Cold War. So
we're assuming, and the information out there, it was Russia. In this day and age, how do you recruit someone, a government official in Australia? What can they offer, I guess? Is it, the old-fashioned thing, money? Is it more often ties to the motherland, if you like?
Look, it can be a combination of any inducements that will work with the particular person concerned, and I don't think that espionage has really changed that much over the years. It could be money, it could be sex, it could be playing to a person's ego, a sense of ideology, or perhaps connections to another country. Really, it's whatever it takes to achieve the intelligence agency's particular objectives with regard to a particular person.
I mean, there's more and more, if you like, vetting these days, presumably, in a lot of different areas. Is it not a bit of a risk for a foreign country to be approaching someone if it doesn't go well?
Yes, it's highly risky.
On the next plane, maybe?
As indeed Mike Burgess said happened. And apart from the spy nest story that Mike shared with us all, we also know in June of 2020 that a number of people associated with the Xinhua newspaper were actually pushed out of Sydney on the same day as ASIO conducted a number of raids. That is behaviour which is consistent with people being considered to have engaged in espionage. So it's high risk. And in other countries, if people are caught engaged in espionage, they could find themselves killed.
Right, all we do is send them home.
We send them home.
And interesting as well, again, you have this situation where embassies get set up and we kind of assume within that structure somewhere espionage elements can be set up and Australia just sort of watches it, and if something happens blatantly then they can send them home. And yet I suppose we and our allies are doing similar things all around the world. It's kind of this agreement that you can come in and we'll monitor you and we'll see who wins the race almost.
Well, there's no question that Australia does engage in espionage overseas. We have an agency that is set up explicitly to undertake that. So that is absolutely true. I would argue that we do this in a way that, frankly, is more targeted and more ethical than the widespread industrial level of intelligence gathering which China engages in. So there is an issue of scale. There's no question about that. But I think pretty much any nation that has the capacity to undertake espionage will attempt to do so.
Interesting as well, the terminology aspect, not talking about left-wing or right-wing or Islamic or right-wing extremism, whatever it might be. Is this about internals or optics, do you think?
I'm not entirely sure, and I wasn't completely persuaded that this was a necessary thing to do. I think there is sometimes value in calling out something for what it is. So if we do see Islamist extremism, I don't personally see a problem in describing it that way. But Mike Burgess certainly has, I think, a very strong case to make that what ASIO is primarily concerned about is the violence that people might want to do in our society as far as terrorism is concerned. And whether that violence comes from a political ideology, a religious ideology, doesn't matter so much if what ASIO's prime function is to prevent that violence from taking place.
I mean, one of the interesting things was happening in country Victoria where Nazis, I mean, people wearing the swastika and so on descended on the town, and we're in a debate around how you even, I don't know, police that, whether you should be allowed to have that symbol considering what it represents.
Well, personally, I think not. I mean, I think that, you know, we should be educated about our history and world history, and really the symbols of Nazi ideology, in my view, simply should not be tolerated. I guess others might take a different view on that. One thing Mike Burgess made clear is that extremism coming from the sort of far right end of the political spectrum does seem to be on the rise, and it is quite a large part of ASIO's workbook. It's actually been that way for quite some time, though.
A few years now that's been...
Some decades, I think.
Decades, right. Okay.
What's really changed, Tom, is that these groups are now much more able to connect with each other overseas, and in a sense that gives them the capacity to be sustained a bit more easily. But no, I was very disturbed by those images from Victoria, and frankly, I don't think they should be tolerated in a country like Australia.
Just finally, briefly, Darwin Port, another call now after this committee for it to be taken back into Australian hands. I know you think it should happen, but is it possible? How do we...
Sooner or later it is going to happen, and I think really it's a case of the government has to find the right moment for it to be a sensible policy step. There is no one now that's prepared to defend the lease of the port for 99 years to a Chinese company, not a single person. And it just shows that we've come a long way in 6 years. So I
when
firmly...
it almost happened by accident, seemingly.
Well, it more or less did. I firmly believe that it will be brought back into government hands at some stage, Tom.